Welcome to Debating Dating, a podcast with me, Rachel Graham.
And me, Mark Jennings.
We're two single friends. In every episode, we'll be discussing our differing perspectives on an aspect of modern dating.
We'll be sharing our honest insights and experiences as platonic pals who are not afraid to give each other the unvarnished truth.
Or laugh at each other's bullshit.
So, this week we are talking about Rom Coms. It's a film episode this week, and we thought who better to get in to join us than our friend and film expert, comedian Stephen Buchanan. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hello, how are we?
Very well.
I don't know why I came in as if it was a stand-up gig.
For listeners, Steve just put both his hands up and I kind of like, you know, the way like old politicians used to do.
Settle down, guys.
Yeah.
He's here.
You're here.
We've got a few different movies we're going to be talking about over the course of the episode, and just sort of picking out some of the themes from them and examining them and having a discussion based off that, rather than the usual listener submissions this week. Now, Steve, of course, you've got a podcast called What's the Script? So basically you and Stuart McPherson listen to watch films each week that he's not seen, he's guessed the plot, and then you see how accurate these are by watching the film. So basically, it's two guys who know nothing about films that do a podcast about films. And me and Rachel were basically inspired by you guys to start doing our own podcast about dating by two people who know nothing about dating.
Jennings said that I was a film expert. I'm nothing of the sort. The whole point of the podcast is the fact that we know fuck all about films, and we guess them and stuff like you said.
Also, I would say about Steve, someone who is universally described by almost every woman that meets him as cute.
That's true. Yes. Very cute guy, and fair play to them. They're absolutely spot on. And I was listening to your first episode as well, talking about height. I'm also a small guy as well, so I feel like I need to represent my community on the Debating Dating podcast. Get those small guys out there.
You've got to represent.
Yeah, exactly.
we try and get a diverse range of opinions on this, and I think it is high time that we had a small man like yourself come on and really fly the flag for you guys, because we've had a lot of men get a bit of a hard time sometimes on this, and I think none more so than the small men.
Hey,
exactly.
I like a small man, right? I've never bashed small men.
Not smaller than you though, Rachel.
Sorry, what? I can't hear you.
Not smaller than you though, Rachel.
So should we move on, Mark? Or...
I think we should stick with this. What's going on with that, Rachel?
We've had this conversation, and I love Stephen Buchanan. He's a great friend of the podcast. And yeah, I love you, Stephen.
I'm not trying to fire into you, Rachel, by the way.
No. You're like, what's the deal, Rach?
What's wrong with small guys, Rachel? Huh?
We've actually had every single guest has had to clarify that at some point to Rachel, so
really?
I usually just cut it out, but I think at some point everyone's had to stop. Rachel's getting a bit too carried away, and they need to go, listen, I'm no firing into you, Rachel. Can I ask you this, Steve? Do you have your height? Do you put your height in your bio? Would you do that? Would you want to get it out in the open straight away, or is it like a reveal later on?
Depends, because nowadays you can get the ones where it's hinge and you have to put it in, so I just put it in there, which I think I prefer that. I prefer just people knowing it. I don't want to be hiding that sort of thing, and then people, if you ever went to meet the person, they'd be like, what the fuck, why did you lie about that? 'Cause that's stupid. So I don't mind that being out there, but then for Tinder, when it's not a requirement or whatever, I wouldn't go out my way to just put in, by the way, I'm a small ass guy. I'm a small little boy,
Because I would imagine, right, there's people that would maybe go, I'll no swipe them if they're under 6 foot. But then potentially if you didn't mention that, right, then they would swipe you, and then you could get chatting and like, oh, this guy's banter's great and all that. And then they find out and they go, well, I don't usually, but he's really won me over, and you change their mind. So whereas if you put it there and they just instantly say no, then you're not even getting that chance.
I do agree with that, but also I don't know if there's many times when you are like winning over a person, because even if you do and you're like getting really into the conversation and it's going well, and then you go to meet them, I think they would still feel like you've betrayed their trust or whatever, because you've
been a little catfish.
Like, well, yeah, like specifically if you're like lying about it. See, if you're like, oh, I'm 6 foot, and then you're 5'5.5", which I am, like that's not going to be a good look. Do you know what I mean? But maybe if you've just not mentioned it and they've not asked, and then you go and meet them, then it's a bit different. I don't know.
Interesting insight into the under 6 foot world. You know, it's
the under 6 foot community.
That's it.
Representation is very important, so I'm glad you're here.
I agree. Thanks very much.
So this week we're going to be talking about rom-coms and things like that. So we've got a couple of films to chat about. The first one that we're going to go to is a classic, the well-known, well-loved film, When Harry Met Sally.
So it came out in 1989. I did my research actually. It came out in 1989. And I think it's kind of like the forefather of the rom-com. Like, I mean, I think there's kind of ones before it, but I think it's the one that kind of really put it on the map and kind of started everything off in a really good foot. Like, it's the one that's done really, really well, and it has like really important messages to do with relationships and dating. It has the whole question about, you know, can men and women ever really be friends without sex getting in the way? I think Us Three is a great example of yes, we can. And but obviously it's
me and Steve had sex, and it's never bothered our relationship.
It's never ruined our relationship.
I'm so happy for you guys. And yeah, it's just like, I think it's just a solid rom-com. I actually think it's maybe my favourite one. What did you guys think?
Well, I'd say there's definitely rom-coms before this, dating back probably to Shakespearean times, I would say, if not before.
It wouldn't be called a rom-com.
Oh yeah.
No.
The rom comedy of errors.
The big thing in When Harry Met Sally is the whole thing where Harry says to her, it starts like, oh, men and women can't be friends. And his thing was like, oh, they can't be friends if there's an attraction there or whatever. And he's clearly attracted to Sally, right? Was it Meg Ryan, is it?
Meg Ryan, yeah.
Very attractive woman.
My thing that I don't like about When Harry Met Sally, which I would say is a great film, right? A really enjoyable film. The big flaw in it is that there is no world in which a guy like Harry, aka Billy Crystal, right, would be that close to a woman as beautiful as Meg Ryan, right, Sally, and not be in love with her and not want to be with her, or would just hang about with her as friends for however amount, you know, the years or whatever that they hang about before they actually get together. It doesn't make any sense. And then at the end he suddenly realises that he wants to be with her. It's ridiculous. There is no way that, like, if you were in that close proximity, that beautiful a woman, you wouldn't want to be with her.
The only really bit that annoyed me, and you kind of touched on it there, was the fact that at the end he just has this epiphany and he's like, oh, well, she's the woman for me, even though, you know, they shagged, and then he was like, this is weird. And I quite liked that, because I was like, oh, this is a bit different. I thought they were just going to shag and then live happily ever after, but he was like, they both kind of got the fear or the ick or whatever it was, and they went their separate ways, and I was like, oh, this is quite interesting. It's like that they've went down that avenue, and then at the end he was just like, it felt tacked on. He was, oh, that actually I do actually love her, and you know, I'm just going to do this big grand gesture of love and go after her on New Year's Eve, and then it felt a bit tacked on for me.
Nah, but it doesn't just come from nowhere. It's not like he's like, oh, I've just realised that she's attractive. It's that they get beyond the attracted to each other stage, and that they become really good friends. And then what happens is, obviously they sleep together, and then there's a weirdness where they both are like, I think he kind of pulls away, so then she feels hurt, so then she pulls away. But then that hurts her feelings, so she decides to kind of slightly cut him out of her life, and then he misses her. So it's not like it's like, oh my god, it's just come to me. It's that he's like, oh, I really miss having her in my life, and I would like that to be a romantic thing.
But then that makes me believe that after say that's a real snapshot into their life, say that's real life, as soon as the cameras stop rolling a couple of months down the line, he's going to be like, actually, I was right in the first place. I don't actually love her. Do you know what I mean?
Why are you ruining this for me?
No, you're wrong, because right at the end, then it's them talking, and they're talking about how they met, and they've been together for ages, so...
But in real life, see if you were like, I really like this person as a friend, and then I don't see it as romantic, and then at the end, he's like, oh, I miss this person, so I just want them back, then that's not going to really... Once you've got them again, you're going to go back to those old feelings.
Yeah.
That's so cynical. I didn't think you'd be a little cynical boy.
No, but that's the way it happens, isn't it?
I don't think so.
Specifically with this film, I think the opposite thing makes sense in that, just like Sally is just so beautiful. Like, she's the most beautiful woman in the film by far. At one point, he goes like, oh, you're the first, beautiful woman that I've ever, not wanted to sleep with and all this sort of stuff. Doesn't it make sense that he wouldn't want to? Doesn't it make sense that he would hold out for all that time and then do it? It doesn't make sense that once they slept together, he would suddenly become disinterested, because they've already been pals for ages and all that. And it doesn't really make any sense. His character, what he does, from the whole being friends for as long, without it happening, then something happening, then him feeling weird about it happening, and then him finally realising. You would basically, as soon as, in reality, if that happened, if they finally slept together, then they would just get together. They just needed the extra jeopardy, right? The one thing I would say is that, see, because obviously at first she's really not into him and all the rest of it, and then they become pals. And I would say a bit of a baller move by him to pretend to not be into her for that long, because it worked. But it's, it was a very, very long haul.
I think you're both missing the point. I think that the fact that it jumps around so much in time, and it's like they meet at the end of college and then it skips however many years.
It's like 5 years and then another 5 years.
Yeah. The whole point is that it's like a timing issue as well, So when they see each other, he's got a girlfriend, and then the next time she's got a boyfriend, and then the next time he's getting married and all stuff. So there's elements of that. And I think also what you're missing is that he doesn't really have a female friend, so he's missing that in his life, and then he finds that with her. So it's almost like he's gone, right, well, I don't have that, and I really appreciate that. So it's like, okay, yes, she is beautiful. I also think that you can have attractive friends and not want to sleep with them. She's very beautiful, but I'm feeling a wee bit insulted. You're like, no, honestly, and I'm like, okay, well, it's not actually a reflection on people's beauty, okay, if you don't want to sleep with them.
No,
have you had Meg Ryan as a friend?
Exactly, because the thing about the movies, obviously, is it's meant to be a stand-in for your actual, your real life, and obviously in real life, most people don't have pals or no MD really that's as attractive as all these movie stars. So in theory it would kind of be like what Steve was describing, it the guy being a bit if he didn't want to date in the first place, he wouldn't have changed his mind at some point. But in the film,
he was worried about losing her as a friend when they slept together, and the complications of sex and love and relationships. So I think that's why. I don't think it's that he's like, oh my god, she's so disgusting after we've slept together, I just have the ick. I don't think it's the ick. I think it's just that he's like, oh fuck, I don't know if this was the right thing to do, especially because she was vulnerable, because she was upset about an ex-boyfriend getting married to someone else.
Yeah, the thing that kind of confused me at that moment was they should have hammered home why he felt that way, because it wasn't really tied up, I don't think, that well. It was just you could see that he was a bit weird about it and pulling away, but I don't understand the full context of why that was.
But surely you've slept with someone that is attractive, and then you've just gone, oh, I don't know if this was the right thing to do.
Radio silence.
Pause.
Why would that ever happen? And also because
why would that ever happen?
Well, because the only time you would ever feel that way is it's like, oh, I don't really like this person that much. You get the.
But it's not always how they look.
No, I'm not saying it's about how.
No, but he likes the personality, doesn't he?
He already likes her. He hangs about with her all the time. He's his best pal, and she's gorgeous. And then they sleep together, and then he's leaving early the next day, like he does with all these other women. It makes no sense at all. See if you met, that right type of person, you would, and who would be more for him than her? They spend all their time together, always kicking about museums and all that. They like each other's company just for it in itself. Then they sleep together, and then after all this time where he's just hanging about with her all the time anyway as a pal, then they sleep together, and then all of a sudden it's like pumped and dumped. It doesn't even make any sense.
Well, I'm going to make a bold statement, right? I think that Harry in When Harry Met Sally is the original soft boy, because if you think about the beginning, he talks about how he will read the end of a book in case he dies in the time that it takes him to read it, right?
That's
He's
quite
classic,
soft boyish. Yeah.
isn't it? He's like, I think about death for hours. Beam me up, soft boy. He's a classic soft boy. And she is like the complete opposite of that. So maybe there's elements of he thinks he's deeper than her.
He's also quite cynical though, and he's quite aware of, like, he would talk about, he's like, he's just kind of upfront about, like, oh, why would I have a female friend? You know, these sort of things. Like, obviously it's a bit of soft boy because it's a rom-com, and I think that's just part and parcel of the genre, especially because of like how long ago it was. Like, there's some stuff now that probably comes across a wee bit cheesy in the film, but actually at the time it was probably like kind of original now, like then, and now just feels a bit like kind of like hack because it's been repeated. But there's loads of stuff in films like this, and you go, oh, like that's probably the first time that was ever like sort of heard in a mainstream, you know, way. Do you know what I mean?
And it didn't feel like, you know, any other rom-com. Like, it had those wee clippets of the people talking to the cameras, and I liked how it was spaced out over a certain amount of time, and the question of can men and women be friends and all that. I thought it did have really different stuff about it, and that's why I did enjoy it. This
film basically is like people being friends and then they get in a relationship at the end of it, right? And that's obviously, there's a common term of the friend zone. Now, I think for me, right, I think the friend zone is a bad way to go about trying to get with somebody, right? I think a lot of guys think, right, like they fancy a lassie, the lassie's not into it, let's just be friends, the classic line that they get, right? And they go, right, okay, well, we'll be friends, but I'll convince her to get with me eventually, right? And see, trying to go through the friend zone to get to a relationship, it's like trying to go through the Bermuda Triangle, right? Because it's like a lot of people have got lost going that route, basically. I think you need to go direct. You need to make your feelings clear for the get-go about that, right? I'm interested in you in a romantic way, and if that isn't the case, then like it's not a pure, you know, I'm not going to just kid on, I want to be your pal. But the amount of people that like try and do the friend zone route as a way to eventually trying to get in a relationship, I think is a very flawed method.
Well, the friend zone term is like really, like, very woke people don't like the term friend zone, because it's like kind of making out like women owe something, like, and there's that kind of thing of being like, oh well, she's put me in the friend zone, and it's like, well, like, no, she hasn't. She's just not choosing to sleep with you. You know, it's almost like, it's like she because she's a woman, she owes you sex or whatever. So I feel like the whole friend zone thing makes me like, oh. But I mean, I've never been friends with someone that it's then progressed into something. But I like the idea of it. But maybe I like the idea of it because of all these rom-coms where they're friends first.
Putting all this shite in your head in all these Hollywood films.
Honestly, like I feel like my whole adult life has been shaped by these rom-coms, and honestly, like I'll have thoughts about things where I'm like, okay, well, like if this happens, then this means this, and then I'm like, that is flawed thinking, but it's just because I'm so used to these extravagant gestures, or this kind of like, you know, if we hate each other and then it turning into a thing, and it's like, actually, that would be a wee bit weird.
I do know what you mean, Jennings, by it's not a good route to go down. I used to try and go down that route, I think, in high school. I can
imagine this.
And sometimes it's the only route offered.
Well, exactly, because sometimes it's like up front, like the girl would be like, by the way, we're just pals, how's it going, old buddy? And I'd be like, I can't hear you. And then just like powering through, like pretending that I'm still in with a chance or whatever, when clearly from the get-go it's like, you've not got a chance here.
The thing with rom-coms is that like often they are quite like cheesy. I would say that like When Harry Met Sally is maybe the least cheesy of a lot of them, because I think it's quite classy. Like it's got like loads of jazzy music in it and all that kind of stuff. But it does kind of bring up the whole thing of the trope of like like a couple who don't like each other at the beginning and then they become friends and then they end up together at the end, and I feel like that's repeated all the time.
That's classic, and the whole big declaration of love at the end is so much of a trope.
And running,
running to get to
from your ear,
which and that's not something that they came up with, because that's in Breakfast at Tiffany's and bloody other examples, I'm sure.
It was a good way of doing it, though. I thought it was a good way of doing it, like, because here's the thing, right? Like, I really liked it. And at the end, it feels like you've been kind of emotionally through the ringer. Like, oh, thank God, Harry and Sally, they got together, you know? Because the whole time, I don't know what it's like. Like, do you put yourself in the female shoes, Rachel? Because me, the whole time, I'm putting myself in Harry's shoes, going like, oh, if only I could get Sally, you know? But I sort of don't like watching rom-coms because you go through such an emotional ringer, right? Because it's like, I hope they get together, and in your head, and you're like, oh, you know, well, if Harry can get Sally, it means maybe I can get Sally, right? But then you turn it off, and you're just alone. You don't even know a Sally, never mind being able to get with her, right? And then, it's like, so there's that, right? So it just kind of, like, gives you this sort of false hope, right? And actually, sometimes it's even worse. See, if you're in a relationship, right, and you're watching it, you go to the movies or whatever, and you're with somebody, particularly if it's not going well, and then you watch this, you know, romantic thing and all that, and then you turn to your partner and you're like, she's no my Sally, or he's no my Harry, you know what I mean? And then, like, oh, if I stay in this relationship, am I never going to meet my Harry or my Sally or whatever? So these films are just like this, it just give you this false hope, and this sort of, you know, way, like, it makes you want to go, oh, if only I could experience that, and then reality sends you coming crashing back down to the ground, basically.
That's one of the things as well that's probably one of the reasons why you feel that way, is they always use like mad ugly leading guys, and then it's like this pure stunning woman that they get with. Meg Ryan was like amazing for like the bit that she looked like she could be 21, and then she looked like she could almost be 40 as well, but like still just this amazing beautiful woman. And man, Billy Crystal's just got him like, I just pictured him as who is he in fucking Monsters Inc? Mike Wazowski, the wee green guy, his wee voice. I just pictured Mike Wazowski trying to shag Meg Ryan.
Which is him sitting on the stool with a little microphone. But
Mike Wazowski. That's the. Here's a question for you, Rachel. Do you think that Billy Crystal was A, good in that role, and B, attractive?
Yeah, so I think that he was A, good in that role, and B, attractive. And I think that it's because I think we learn so much from rom-coms, and I've always been really into films and, you know, really fantasizing about, you know, putting myself in the role and all this kind of stuff. I think I can fancy anyone. Like, I think, honestly, present me with someone and I can make myself fancy them if they show enough, you know, like, if they're funny enough.
Charisma.
Or, charismatic. Like, and I think that, you know, with Harry, like, he is a very attractive character. And I do think that I think that I can be a lot more forgiving with looks. But maybe I've learned that from watching rom-coms where the guy is not always the most attractive. So I'm like, oh well, but look at all of the stuff that like, look what he can also give me, so it's not all being shallow.
Yeah.
I sort of think that is reflective of reality a wee bit, though, because I do think that it's generally true that women are able to look past, or able to see past looks a lot more, and fancy some guy for their personality, whereas, like, because that's, I don't know, it's like more valuable or something, whereas guys, it's, you know, they value biologically, whatever it is, like, looks in a woman, and that's why you get these tropes of, like, you know, Billy Crystal, who's not like a classically good looking guy, but he's, you know, he is a very charismatic and quite attractive guy in that role.
Yeah.
And then Meg Ryan, who's just obviously, like, you know, smart and all that kind of stuff, but also just like a pure beautiful woman. So
but
it's funny.
Do you think it's biological, or do you think a huge part of it is, if that is all of the media that you've been consuming your entire life is also providing you with, like, oh, the female lead is this beautiful woman?
I sort of think though that there's obviously, this is going back to the nature nurture debate, but I think that a lot of that media comes from the biology. So it's like what sells in Hollywood or whatever is beautiful people and all that sort of stuff. But these stories like are all, you know, like it's just a reflection of the way things are in the world. I would say that, like, you know, you can learn a lot from Hollywood movies, but you can also learn a lot of stuff that's just not real, and it can have you believing in a lot of stuff that is harmful. Do you know what I mean? Like the whole kind of thing, which we'll probably get into when we talk about some of the later stuff, but like certainly, and we spoke about this on a lot of episodes, but like this whole thing of like guys who try and be all romantic, and in reality, you know, when you the guy that hangs off the Ferris wheel in the Notebook Gosling or whatever. Yeah. You know, that's meant to be this big romantic thing.
Or the big boom box on his shoulders outside your house and say anything.
Yeah. If anyone is ever...
just saying.
Yeah. But if anyone is ever going to come close to that in real life, it is like, that's a pure last throw of the dice, you know, if somebody's doing that, because they've already been... It's been made clear to them that the person's not interested, so it just becomes anything that's like romantic in a film is creepy in real life, basically.
I don't agree with that.
You don't believe that Ryan Gosling hanging off a Ferris wheel threatening to kill himself if the woman doesn't go out with him is creepy?
Sign me up, baby. I want it in my life. That happened with my cousin, though. My cousin had like 2 or 3 guys.
What, fucking M&D's with somebody
hanging off that happy caterpillar fucking creepy ride.
Fucking Alton Towers or some shit like that.
Yeah, but you know, a normal reaction to that would be like, oh my god, that's, you know, that person's maybe a wee bit unwell, but I'm like, oh my god, sign me up, that sounds great.
Really?
Yes, really.
That's want insane.
Before we move on from When Harry Met Sally, can we get your thoughts on then the big question in it? So what's your take on the can men and women ever be friends thing?
I reckon, obviously, like Rachel said before, we've kind of proven that you can be platonic pals, with men and women can be friends. Like Mark said about if you're pals with Meg Ryan, is that ever going to enter?
I'm finding this more and more insulting, okay?
Rachel, you're a good-looking lassie, but Meg Ryan, come on.
I know I'm not Meg Ryan, but let's not make this the only point.
I'm being facetious. I think that's the right use of the word.
I could see the doubt in your eyes. You were like, I'm being full.
But that's interesting though, because see, you've said like you think you could theoretically be attracted to anyone, Rachel, if they were charismatic enough. Whereas like what we are saying is basically like you could understand, you know, only wanting somebody as a pal, and then there is a certain barometer, you know, and Meg Ryan is beyond that of like, if they're hot enough, like, nah, there's no way that you would be able to just be...
Yeah, could you just go for like a drink or whatever they were doing, like going to museums and going for meals and all that, without going, maybe there's a slight possibility that this might go to the next level at some point?
I honestly, when I watched When Harry Met Sally when I was a child, I used to think could never be friends with a guy and not want to end up with him. But I think that's because I'm fed so much this thing of being like, who am I going to end up with? Who am I going to marry? Who, like, you know, in all of these rom-coms, all the loose ends are tied up with people getting together with different people, and it happens in When Harry Met Sally with like the 2 friends get together and all this. It's always like everyone couples up. So I think and because I watched so many films like that, I was like, oh no, I would just think, well, if this is my really close friend, then we're going to end up together. But I suppose like, the evidence is that, like, you know, we're just friends and that's not ever been a thought.
No, like, I know what you mean, Liz, but I guess for me it feels different because there's like an element of we've all like worked together in like a sketch group, and for me that feels different than just meeting a person. And then like the way Harry met Sally, like going on a road trip and all that, it wasn't like a working relationship and they just kept bumping into each other. I don't think you could just start, that's why I didn't think they could just start being pals together, you know.
It's a pretty good meet cute.
if they'd done a remake now, it need to be called When Harry DM'd Sally. And it'd be like, he DMs her, and then 5 years later,
when
she
he's
DMs her.
Hi, how are you? Happy
It goes back and
Christmas. Hi.
they end up 10 yeyears down the line, they end up together, and then they look back in their inboxes and they're like, oh, remember we DM'd each other 10 years ago. Basically, you can be friends with somebody of the opposite sex if you're attracted to the opposite sex. You can be friends with them if you've got other options going on. And I think a lot of the time how workplace romances happen is because that's basically your only exposure. So like a lot of guys, right, like the women they work with is their only exposure to women, really, because they're not dating anybody else, or they're divorced or whatever it is, right? So of course you then get you start, that's your world, and that's your options, and you start looking in the person that you've got the most connection with. You do. But if you're working with somebody, and I've had quite a few female friends, I would say, that throughout the years that I've worked with or whatever, and like I've always had other things going on and other people, and like me and you, Rachel, like we'll talk to each other about dating and things like that, and there's never like a thing of like, like it's just a pals thing, because you've got other stuff going on in your life, and then, do you know what I mean? So regardless, I know whether or not you might be attracted to them or not, like you can just go, you can compartmentalise it more. Whereas
Can I bust your theory though, Mark? Have you slept with these female friends?
No. Genuinely, like, no. I've had in a few different workplaces, like maybe they've been in a relationship, or even if they've not. But it's just like it would have been weird to, and not that I maybe wouldn't, if the chance arose, like there's people that I maybe would have, but
that's Harry's point, is that it doesn't even necessarily need to actually happen. It's that the sex thing always gets in the way, or the thought of having sex, or that. So that would mean that that's true,
I suppose. But then I don't know. It's like it seems quite. Like I remember, like I used to work with this lassie, and we'd both kind of like had people that we really wanted to get with, and we would sort of share stories with each other about that, and we would kind of. Do you know what I mean? We both knew where each other were coming from, so we, like, in that way, like, there was a bit of a confidant. Do you know what I mean? And that's the way I seen her.
I do think that options thing is interesting. I think there is something in that, and also, like, I guess it depends the way you look at sex. Like, maybe a person doesn't see sex as like a big thing to them, so maybe they're just thinking. I've thought about having sex with anyone, like even an old lady. You might be like, oh, I could shag her or whatever.
I'm pure nodding away. I was like,
You're like, yeah, totally. I was just thinking of this. There used to be this mad old woman that worked in the co-op with me, and she was the most randy old woman you've ever met in your life. Just always talking about shagging out. Like we would be like schoolboys, and she'd be like, "Oh, you're on for a wee swatch today," just pure. Really filthy.
Would she catch you in the back and go, "Come on, Stephen, we both know that men and women cannot just be friends."
But it's like getting to a sort of creepy point as well, because it's like, say, like you done a wee, how you used to boss slap your pals or whatever, you go like that, and then she'd be like, "You want me to rub it better?" and laughing, and you'd be like, "This is weird," but I think some people just don't view sex as like a big thing, so there maybe it does enter their mind and it's not a big deal.
I mean, there's asexual people as well, like not everyone operates in the same way with sex, I would say.
Yeah, and obviously the question was, can men and women be friends? But then that means straight men and straight women, doesn't it? Because obviously you could have a gay pal who's pals with like women, so it doesn't take that.
But I suppose you could say, could a gay man be friends with a gay man, or could a gay woman be friends with a gay woman?
That's the thing they always say, isn't it? Like, it's why women like to have like gay male friends, is because they know the guy doesn't want anything from them. And I think you've actually said that about me, Rachel, before, that you value my friendship because that I'll tell you the truth rather than fucking saying something to pure
get me in bed. I know.
Motive.
Yeah, I know.
I'm the only man you can trust.
What about me?
This is will they won't they again, Stephen.
Well, Steve, unfortunately, Rachel has already made her feelings clear on guys under 6 foot. So.
Actually, it's guys below Rachel's height, and I believe I'm maybe half an inch taller. So I'm just saying.
Well, that half inch can make a big difference.
I'm drawing a line under that conversation. We're moving on. Come on.
So the next film we might have a wee chat about is 500 Days of Summer. So this one, obviously, a non-linear movie. Quentin Tarantino joint. No, it's not really, but like that's a speciality into it. But no, so kind of the thing about 500 Days of Summer that I think kind of makes it stand out from a lot of different films is that kind of, again, spoiler alert, but at the end, after, you see the whole thing and it's the story told through the guy's eyes, basically, and then at the end, and he's romanticised the whole thing about Summer, the girl that he's in love with, and then he's kind of told to, actually think about, your memories and think about everything, and then it shows you parts of the scenes from earlier in the movie, but it shows you the bits that it had cut out where it's basically all these things that Summer is not interested in him that much, or things that show you that she's not really right for him, or that they're not right for each other. It was quite a rare insight into that thing of like looking at stuff through rose-tinted glasses, because I think it's so common, particularly when a relationship ends, to look back on it and you remember all the good stuff and you forget all the bad stuff. So I suppose a way of summing it up is kind of like, it's hard to, when you look through rose-tinted glasses, it's a lot harder to notice all the red flags that used to be there,
Yeah, definitely. I love it. I think it's good. I think it's really good. Here's how much of like a non-expert I am on film. It took me to the end of the movie to realise that she was called Summer and it was called 500 Days of Summer because it was about her. I just thought it was a quirky title about it being placed
and they're
in the summer.
500 days together.
Yeah, honestly, until the end of it, until it went to like he meets a girl called Autumn or something, and then it goes to like brackets 1. I was like, oh fuck, is that she's Summer? All right, and she's right. That's class. Yeah. That is a class title for a movie.
You were like, plot twist. Where's this come from?
And maybe a sequel as well. Fucking hell.
You're like reacting to like her being called Summer the way people did when they found out Bruce Willis was a ghost.
The signs were all there. I didn't see it, but if you rewind it, he calls her Summer about 20 times during the thing.
There's some wee Easter eggs dropped throughout this film that led you up to that.
It was good for me to watch as someone who is an avid wearer of the rose-tinted spectacles.
A hopeless romantic is what you mean.
Yeah. Big time.
Yeah, big time. But yeah, I do think that it was good for me to see, because it was a hard watch, especially like the scene where it's like how he hopes the night will go, where she's they bumped into each other and she's invited him to his house party, and it splits the screen and it's like showing like what he would like the night to be and what the reality is, like the expectation versus the reality. And that was so good, because I paint so much. I had a friend in the Josh Jones episode that when Josh Jones asked us if we were commitment phobes, and then my friend texted me like, yeah, so when he asked you that if you're a commitment phobe, you're someone who's fucking planned the wedding when you've not even met the person.
I think it gave a refreshing take off of the usual kind of standard romantic fare. It kind of gave a more realistic thing of what goes on in relationships, and also as I say, what you do in your own mind when you sort of look back at a relationship and you only remember those good bits, and then like in the film it's like somebody needs to kind of remind them. I guess like a wee girl, like his sister or something like that, and like she's like, oh, she wasn't that perfect for you, and then they remember all the bad stuff, because it's so easy to do that, like to look back and be like, oh man, I really missed this about this person or that, or all these nice things. But you're so selective in your memory of only remembering that, and you totally gloss over all the stuff that wasn't right, that might totally outweigh all the nice stuff,
To pick up on what Rachel was saying earlier about, you're like this hopeless romantic and stuff. I thought it was interesting that the guy was the hopeless romantic in it, and she was a sort of passive person. It wasn't really more of the shagger or more of when usually the guy would be that sort of person and the girl would be I hope that we get together and stuff. He was the more romantic side of things.
Did you relate to it?
I just thought it was a good, different thing in rom-coms that you don't see as much.
I think as well, like summer for me, I mean, 2009, 9 plus 7, I was like 16. So that was quick maths, actually. So I was like 16, and I think like, we learn so much from these films, and we kind of like, it's our kind of like formative years when we're a teenager, and I think seeing that film then was really valuable. I also just wanted to completely mold myself onto Summer, because that was like completely the opposite of how I would be. And I think like Kate Nash vibes and Summer from 500 Days of Summer, I was just like, I just need to be these people because they're so cool and they don't care, and there's like an element of like apathy with her, and like that's what kind of like, you watch the film, I think, when you're that age and you get very attached to it and you take it for like what it is. But then I think, as the years have gone by, a lot of people have said like he's a bit creepy, or he's this, or he's being an arsehole by putting so much upset and heartache when she communicated clearly. And then basically is like, oh, she's this horrible person who's like broken my heart. Although I would say that, the end, spoiler alert, when she's just like, yeah, I found with this new guy that I've married that, it was the thing that I was never really sure with you. I think that would sting so much, especially on a little bench, which we've spoken about before, a breakup bench. Awkward when there's a breakup bench because you're in public.
Well, if people are saying about him, it's a bit creepy and all that sort of stuff, but see that whole thing about obsessing too much over somebody anyway, is that not like, it's more of a reflection on that aspect of, I suppose, love that makes you do that, and it's like, is that in itself just inherently unhealthy?
And I think that the fact that everyone in that situation, you can relate to that. You if you do pure like someone, you do act a bit fucking mental. There's even if you don't want to admit it, you do start going through their mad Instagram posts and all this shit and like message. I don't know, like the examples that he does, but there is an element of that it does make you a bit more insane than what you usually would be. And I think it's good to shine a light on that, even though people might go, oh, that's creepy, but it's also probably quite realistic.
Yeah, I had that the other day where I was caught with my Instagram stalking in that this person was like, I was like, is your birthday the 11th of February? And they were like, oh no, it's the 10th of February. And I was like, oh shit. And then I realised that I'd got that from, they'd posted a picture of like a cake on the 11th of February. And I was like, I'd obviously been like creeping. And I was like, oh, I don't think I ever told you. I was like, oh, never mind. Anyway, so
doesn't matter. I wasn't looking at all your old Instagram posts.
I would say about 500 Days of Summer that I do like that wee bit at the end that you said, Steve. Like, I like that wee bit where it says, like he meets Autumn at the end, and then it goes to day back 1 of Autumn, and it's the days of Autumn, because it's like it's another sort of trope of rom-coms, obviously, that they kind of do away with, which is the kind of quote unquote the one, because it's like, okay, this was summer and this whole movie's been about summer and his love for summer, but then ending. It's like autumn comes after summer, and that's a nice metaphor for just for life and love and relationships and all that, I think. So it was a nice, refreshing movie in quite a few ways, I would say.
And also it kind of leaves it open where it's like the one in brackets for autumn is like, this might not be a happy ending either. This is just the next chapter of maybe after that is winter, and then run to spring, and then it bumps into summer again, and it starts all over, and it's just like a never-ending cycle.
But that is kind of it. It's like the seasons. Like your life is like the seasons. The leaves fall off the trees, and then they grow back, and all the rest of it. And I think that's quite a nice way to look at relationships and all that. next one we're going to talk about is He's Just Not That Into You, which was a film I really liked actually, and I was very surprised when I first watched this at like how well I thought it kind of corresponded with sort of what my feelings are about, you know, attraction and things like that. I've spoke before about how like I sort of like where I've said I wouldn't take it personally if I found out somebody, you know, wasn't into me because they kind of can't help it. And I think very early on now, I sort of feel like the way I act is if I feel like someone's not really into it, then I'll go, okay, they're just not, rather than telling myself all the things that you usually say. And that's kind of the point of this film. Like, it starts off with, like, you know, all the kind of things you would say to your pal. If your pal's telling you, oh, you know, this guy went on a date and he's not texted me back, I'm not really sure. And it's like all these reassuring messages like, oh no, it'll be fine. And oh, my cousin had a guy that didn't text them for 4 weeks and now they're married. And all of this kind of stuff, all these anecdotal evidence. And basically the big thing that they talk about in this is like the exception versus the rule.
Yeah.
So it's like the rule being, oh well, if you don't hear back from a guy in 2 days or something, then, or a woman or whatever, they're not into you.
I kind of wanted to talk to you both about it because it feels like it's trying to give loads of messages of what guys really think. And, you know, so it's like, if he's not calling you, if he's not marrying you, all these kind of things.
There's also a bit in it, and it's like, if she's not sleeping with you.
Yeah, which was really good because it was like, if she's not sleeping with you, it's like, if she ever refers to you as cute, sorry, Stephen Buchanan.
I'm very cute. I'm very undeniably cute.
Most of it is basically Jennifer Goodwin and Justin Long become pals and he gives her loads of advice. So basically it's me and you, Mark, where it's like that kind of thing of being like, listen, he doesn't like you, and she's like, what? That's
well, I thought that's so interesting because that is the centre of the whole movie, right? And so at one point he says to his Justin Long character, who actually I really relate to him actually, and I do think
big surprise you related to the guy who's
the
like
shagger.
the shagger who's like, listen, Jin.
Well, I watched it again last night, and because I remember when I first seen it, I really was like, oh, like it kind of really spoke to me. And I watched it last night and I was trying to remember exactly what, and all I could really think was that basically this guy's right about whatever he's saying. So at one point he says to her, he goes, if a guy's treating you like he doesn't give a shit, he genuinely doesn't give a shit. And what's quite funny, right, I think, is that, like, so he explains this to her, and the whole central plot of the movie is based around him saying this to her. And he's explaining it to her like this, it's this big revelation, and then she goes into the work the next day and she's like, hey, wait a minute, maybe when all these things happen and we all tell each other it's fine, we are saying the exception and it's actually the rule. And it's basically like it's kind of one of these things that you could put like the Bechdel test or whatever, you could probably pull it up as like, effectively he's just had to mansplain this thing to her before she realises this quite obvious thing, right? But for me, like, I'd say, because like a big talking point in the film is like about someone's having a relationship problem. So like Jennifer Aniston's character, it's like she's been with her partner 7 years and he won't marry her, right? And it's like, oh, the guy who's in love with the girl who's not sleeping with him anymore, all that kind of stuff. And like, and their pals
she's
always
just not that into him. That's
and their pals always tell them some
sorry,
story.
did you follow that?
She's
just not that into him.
But that's what happens. Like, it's like so basically in these scenarios, like you then see all the pals always telling them some story, like, oh well, my cousin was with a partner for 12 years before they get married, etc. Right? Or it's kind of anecdotal evidence, the same way kind of that you hear people giving like during COVID. It's like, oh, my cousin had it and he was over it in 2 days and he was fine, didn't have any symptoms and that. And you're like, I don't know if that's really true. But he tells her basically, like, if it seems like he's not into you, he's just not that into you. And that, as simple as it sounds, is so true. And I've always, I do really think that basically, like, anytime you're questioning, something seems a bit off, something seems a bit this, something seems a bit that, like, the vast majority of cases, your gut instinct is right, and that they don't. It's just that they don't, because if they really felt the way that you want them to feel about you, they would act like it. And if they're acting in a way that seems contrary to that, it's basically because what you want in your head to be the case and the reality is different.
It's definitely a mid-20s revelation. I think everyone kind of works that out of being like, listen, if he there's no point in looking through ambiguous texts and trying to analyze an X or, you know, a full stop. Like, if he wants to meet you, he'll arrange to meet you. And that was a really, you know, hard thing to learn for me, the little Jennifer Goodwin, of just being like, but what if this? I do think there are exceptions, but I think, yeah, ultimately what they're saying is that kind of thing of being like, well, do you know what? And sometimes I wish I could go back and be like, to myself, of being like, just leave it with that person because they're not valuing you because they don't want to be with you, but then just go to the next person because there might be someone else who does, you know?
Yeah, I reckon that, like you were saying, Rachel, there's exceptions, and I think it's pretty plain across the board that it's like, you know, if they want to be with you in terms of meeting up for a date or whatever, then they would text you or they would, you know, I think that's quite clear cut, but I think the marriage thing and kids and all that sort of stuff muddies it a bit because certain people might have different career aspirations or whatever, but
there's timing. Timing is a thing, and like I don't think it's finding excuses. I think it's just that thing of being like, you know, sometimes life isn't as simple as that.
There was the Harry Met Sally thing. There's the timing issue as well, where it's like sometimes they might be at different places in their life at different times. And I think that's definitely true.
See, when what you said earlier about, you know, the thing of like him being like, listen, let me give you this revelation, blah, 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 blah. Like, if he's into you, he'll make it clear. And then the next day she has this thing of being like, oh my God, yes. And then the next day she's like, hang on, he's into me because he set me up with someone, but then the person didn't turn up. He told them the wrong day, and then he turns up, and then he's like arranging all these things. And I have to put my hands up and say, see, when that happened last night when I was watching it, I was thinking, yeah, he is into her. Those are all signs.
But she is you. That character is you in that film. Because like, you said earlier on, it's like you're already plotting the wedding and all that shit, and that's what she was like. She'd be pure turned up at the bar to try and, on the off chance that E from Entourage was there. Do you know what I mean? All this movie shit.
I wrote down what Justin Long said with her big revelation moment. I thought it was funny you wrote that down too, but anyway. So he said, guys invented the spark so they could not call, treat you kind of badly and keep you guessing and then convince you that anxiety and that fear that just develops naturally was actually just a spark, and you guys all buy into it, eat it up and love it. And basically he's saying like that guys have invented this idea of not having a spark. So that,
do you know what's
like,
funny, by the way?
Spark.
See, do you know what's funny? Because I have wrote down this quote as well, but all I wrote was, spark is bullshit.
I cut out that beginning bit.
Do you believe that though? Because to me, I sort of always kind of thought like the spark was more a thing women said. And it was like, it's not as if like men have invented it or something.
I would associate someone saying there's not a spark with like a woman saying it rather than a guy saying it, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of what they're saying is like, so I think the writer's like rewritten it, you know, like I think that he's basically saying, because she goes, oh, you know, a spark's really important. And he's like, oh, there's no such thing as a spark. Yeah. But what I would say, and you know, it kind of came up on the Ick episode, is I do really like trust my body and my instincts and my gut. And I think like the ick is it's like the ick or the spark, isn't it? It's like you feel the spark of being like, oh, there's like excitement, there's butterflies, there's this kind of thing. I do think that does exist. I don't think that is stupid or bullshit. I think that literally your body, and I think it comes from survival of like our bodies are kind of going, the ick is meaning that it doesn't feel right, so I probably don't want to have sex with this person. And, you know, the spark is being like, oh, I would like to, you know, have something with them. It feels right. And you know, that maybe they're a safe person.
I think this I don't think the spark is bullshit either. I think but I would say it's more just like a chemistry. If you've got genuine chemistry with a person, I think that happens a lot, and there's sometimes when you meet someone and you don't have any chemistry with them, and you would say, oh, there's no spark there. But I don't see why it would be a made up thing.
I think, to be honest, I've always sort of thought the spark is basically a way of letting someone down gently. If you could say there's no spark,
it's an easy excuse.
That's an easier thing to say than I didn't find you attractive.
I'm just not that into you, basically.
Or I'm just not that into you, exactly. So I sort of think that's kind of, it's the terminology. The phenomenon exists, obviously you're either attracted to somebody or you know, but calling it the sparks, like as I say, it's a nicer way of putting it than just telling somebody point blank.
The spark, the spark kind of puts across that it's a two-way thing, doesn't it? It's like there's no spark that from both of us, whereas if it's just like, I'm just not that into you, you're just kind of saying, is, you know, I don't like you as a person, but the spark kind of goes, oh, don't worry, it's a two-way street, and then they can accept that, and it's not as embarrassing.
It's this ethereal thing that's just out there. It's not anything to do with you or them. It's like so passive. Oh, the spark wasn't there, the magic didn't happen. You're like, nah, come on, like, it's, you know. But again, it's how you feel, and you've not.
It's a real feeling, definitely, as well as a good way to let someone down easy.
Yeah, and the thing is as well, to go back to the point I'm always going on about, but it's like, you can't, like, if you don't feel a spark, there's nothing you can do about that. So if somebody doesn't feel the spark towards you, you shouldn't like blame them for it, because what can they do? But you want them to just kid on, like, you know what I mean? That's what leads to terrible things happening, as we've seen in
do you think
films.
One person can feel a spark, another person can't?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Really?
Exhibit
but
A.
But surely there's a spark means like yous are both like pure. You can feel the chemistry there.
I think you can be wrong about, you know, like I think you can be excited and feel that there is chemistry and be wrong.
But I think there's a difference between finding someone attractive and finding that there's a spark between someone. That's
the thing though, and I've said this before, like, you can never really know. Like, even if you're like, there was a real spark, I was so into, which basically means I was so into them, but then if they seem like they're into you as well, that's when you're really like, oh, we seem to have a real thing together, you know, there's a real spark. But you're kind of just guessing. You don't really know where, they could just be being polite for all you know. You don't really know, but I think sometimes you do, even just in friendships and things like that, there's some people you just sort of click with, and there's others that don't. And it's this sort of weird thing where it's kind of hard to describe, but you know it when you experience it. And I think you can, that's the thing with the spark, so you can either feel it because you're really feeling it and you're just sort of projecting onto them that they're feeling it back, or it can be that there is just this real click between the both of you, and that's, you know, the fortunate few, I would say, that probably experience that are very lucky, and that's what we're all after at the end of the day. And this actually leads me on to what I thought was quite an interesting bit of the plot, right, which was involving Bradley Cooper and Scarlett Johansson, right? So in it, so obviously Bradley Cooper and Scarlett Johansson bump into each other in the shop, right? Obviously clearly fancy each other. And then Bradley Cooper reveals that he's married, right? And there's a line in it where they say, what if you met the love of your life, but you already married someone else, right? And I think that's such a big fear that a lot of people have in terms of commitment. Maybe it's more a guy thing. I don't know, Rachel, you can maybe speak to that a wee bit. But for me, I feel like that's the problem with commitment, because like, you never know when you might bump into someone and hit it off with Scarlett Johansson, right? And then if you want to do anything about it, you need to go back and all that shit that you promised to the person that you kind of settled with because it was nice, but you know, and you thought this is as good as it's going to get. And that's for me why I don't like, I think it's hard to commit to something that's fine but no like amazing, or that you're really happy in, but there's a part of you that never knows when you're going to bump into Scarlett Johansson and hit it off with her. And now I would also say I'm not fucking Bradley Cooper, right? So maybe sometimes you need to be realistic, but that, I think that quite summed up well, like the sort of conundrum that Bradley Cooper's character's under. It's like, he's clearly committed to this person, they've had all this history and they're there, but then, I mean, Scarlett Johansson body comes along and he's trying his best, but he can't.
Is he trying his best, Mark?
Yeah.
Is he? I mean, he wasn't trying his best.
But can you blame him though? That's what I'm saying. Can you like?
I can.
In the film, was his marriage happy, or was it just a bit like?
This is the interesting thing as well, because it turns out that his wife basically pressured him into getting married, didn't she?
Well, no, not really.
No, she gave him an ultimatum. That's what they say.
Oh, did she?
And that's why it's contrasted with Jennifer Aniston, because Jennifer Aniston and Ben Affleck's relationship's really good, but he just doesn't want to get married because he doesn't believe in it. Whereas Bradley Cooper and his wife are married.
They were like childhood sweethearts, and basically he kind of settled. I just think don't settle. Like this is the thing of like, I think a lot of guys will, you know, be wary of getting into anything because they're like, but what if something better comes along? And I'm like, actually, I think I think you'd have to move to America for you to just bump into Scarlett Johansson, Mark.
I don't know, maybe if she makes Under the Skin too, she'll be kicking about Glasgow again.
Aye, I was going to say that. Aye. You could be one of the people she lures into her van.
You'd go willingly.
This whole commitment and marriage and like, together forever, like, is it like a sort of impossible ask of us as humans? Because ultimately, as you go along, like, you know, then you could be happier down the line with, you know, it could run its course and then you'd be happier with somebody else that you meet. And, you know, at the time when you met the person that you end up marrying, it's like, well, this was, you know, the happiest that I was with this person. And then you meet somebody new and you think, oh, there's this whole other level that I didn't even know was there in terms of how happy I could be or how much I could like somebody. Because I think in this film, it demonstrates quite well the sort of conundrum of that, where you're kind of, you're trying to stick to the kind of commitment that you've made, albeit one that he's kind of been forced into, but also, you know, he's found this thing that's so hard to, you know, to quote another film, it's an offer that he cannot refuse. Do you know what I mean?
That well-known rom-com, The Godfather.
That's what happens.
Stick some oranges in your cheeks.
Yeah, that was like an outtake, like Al Pacino at the start of the film before Scarlett Johansson goes to that shop. Like, we're going to give Bradley Cooper an offer he cannot refuse.
I think we'd all give Bradley Cooper an offer he can't refuse here. He's a good-looking boy.
What I would say as well is, I think that you can have more than one marriage and you're not a bad person. You know, you can be with someone and it can run its course, and, you know, it gets to the end of your fucking 500 days of summer, and then you can, you know, you can both end it, and then you could have a second marriage that's much happier. And I've got like a lot of my parents' friends have second marriages that are really happy and the right thing for them. And I suppose it comes back to the whole
Timing
the
thing.
soulmate, timing, and also just like, you know, just like being with someone that's right for you. Like, I know that, like, if I ever get married, that I don't want to do it with anyone that I don't want to do it with. Like, I wouldn't do it as, like, I would never do something, you know, to appease or whatever. So yeah.
I know guys going to pressure you into a marriage though.
How fucking dare you? You don't know what I've been offered. You haven't seen my DMs, Mark Jennings.
I would be very surprised if someone was. No, but do you know what I mean?
Excuse me?
It's like, you know,
Do you mean like
get...
women in general or just Rachel?
No, I mean no.
He means me.
No,
I imagine it happens just not for her.
You know, I'm sure that you're getting loads of genuine proposals in your DMs, right? What I mean is, what I'm saying is, if you're in a long-term relationship with a guy, you know, it's very unlikely that you at any point are going to get pressured into getting married.
Well, never say never, Mark.
Like, say if you had a boyfriend, Rachel, and you, you know, were quite happy but weren't that happy, and they were like, we're getting married tomorrow, or else, ultimatum. Who was it that got the ultimatum in the film?
Jennifer Connelly and Bradley Cooper. Yeah.
What would you do, Rachel, in that scenario? Get given an ultimatum.
And I'm not really into it.
But it's, you're happy, but you're like, maybe you don't want to get married or whatever.
Am I my current age?
Well, that's fucking, there you go. It's like, that's the thing, it's so easy to be like, oh, just don't get into anything that you're not that into. But the fear is, well, what if I'm fucking just doing this forever and then I'm single my entire life? That's the fear people have.
Do you know what happens in rom-coms as well that we haven't really spoken about, is when you have a friend that you have the thing that when you turn 40 you'll get married. I feel like that happens all the time. Stephen.
What's that?
He's pretending he can't hear. There's that thing where it's...
All right, with Rachel, do you mean? Right, I got it there. I missed it completely. Like, I don't know, like, that is a trope actually, where they're like, if we don't, if we're both single at 40, we'll get married together. And
Yeah.
I've tried to play that card back in fucking 5th year and all that. Going,
Is that right after you get friendzoned? Like, well,
that was my first. That wasn't even a last resort. That was my in move. That was me going, let me tell you, hen. Right, me and you, single 40, we're getting married tonight.
It's like straight away. It's like, I will be friends, but we should probably make some kind of pact.
There's going to be, we've got a contingency plan down the line. So
the one thing I would say about this film as well, right, and I would say this probably about most rom-coms, and it's kind of similar to what I was saying earlier on, but what I felt after watching the end of He's Just Not That Into You is like, maybe there is hope after all. And that is that thing of like, you watch it and you kind of go, oh, well, maybe there's hope for me yet, and it fills you with a nice, sense of wee, like, emotional, it's like a nice wee
Do you both
feeling.
like rom-coms? That's the question. I feel like there's just, obviously I do like them, but do you both like them?
Depends on the one. Yeah, I'm not like opposed to them. I don't. It's not a blanket statement either. Going, I love rom-coms, because I watched Breakfast at Tiffany's, which is very dated now. Wasn't really that into it, but fucking like Dirty Dancing. That's a good film.
Do you know what?
That's not really com though. That's rom.
No. I never watched a lot of films for years, right? Because I always was saying to myself, I don't want to put myself through this emotional roller coaster I need to go on. And I would say When Harry Met Sally is a very good example of like, you're kind of like, oh, it's up and it's down and will they, won't they, the whole thing. And then at the end, you're like, oh, brilliant. And then it feels like you've been through the ringer, and like, and I think with rom-coms in particular, I feel that way about. It's like taking too much of a drug or something like that, and then you're like, you have all these feelings, and then you come down from it, and you're still back where you were, and it's like, it's kind of like something getting given to you and then getting taken away, because you get given all the emotions of what it would be like to be put in these romantic scenarios, and then you get it taken away because you're back in reality, and you're like, oh fuck, I've got nothing like that going on.
Do you know what I do? So I really like a sad film, and I really like feeling sad. Do I like feeling sad? I like feeling sad at
It's an insane thing you say.
No, but like growing up as a teenager, I think like maybe I feel like other people will feel like this. I used to have a Spotify playlist called PMS that was just, I would just play it. It would just be really sad songs, and I would just like
I
cry.
had one of them as well, actually.
Yeah,
did you? Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you kind of want. Are you? Oh, you're being sarcastic.
You've been saying. You thought we had a
Why
period
would we
playlist?
Have one?
You thought me and Jennings had a period playlist.
It was just the fact you both were like, yeah.
I've got 2 playlists. Mm-hmm. One is just got 2 fire emojis as the title, and it's just all rap tunes. And 2 is guitar music, and there's sad songs in there, but there's also happy songs. So I don't just have a sad playlist.
Okay. Well, I used to have a sad playlist that I would play deliberately to cry, and similarly, I would watch, like Titanic, or what's the other really sad one?
That's
The Notebook.
privilege. That's Western privilege, isn't it? Having to force
is.
yourself to be sad.
Well, it wasn't forced. It was more just to kind of like let
it
out. I was going to say the floodgates, but I shouldn't say that close to talking about periods.
See, the thing is about a cry though. That's what they say. Is it's like like your body, it's like
it's releasing emotion. It's really good for you.
It reacts to make you feel happier again, because you're feeling sad. It makes you feel happy, and like I think it's nice sometimes to experience a range of emotions. You know what I mean? But which is rare for me. But but
sometimes it's alright to have a good wee grit. I'm going to put it out there. This is a world exclusive. Have a wee cry sometimes if you want.
It's true. I honestly think it's actually really valuable to let your body like release all that tension, and because like stress and anxiety is really bad for your body, and I think like when you cry, it's designed to make you feel better. But I would deliberately not watch The Notebook or Titanic if I wasn't in a good enough place, and like you were saying, Mark, of like if I was feeling particularly single, I probably would avoid it, because I would be like, I'm never going to meet Jack Dawson,
But for something that's quite standard rom-com fare, I do think it gets across a more realistic message than most, and it is kind of that thing. It's like, you know, if it seems like they're not into you, they're just not into you, and it's as simple as that. And I think that's something that gives you, like, can help you avoid some of the sort of trouble that you can get in if, like you, Rachel, you've watched a lot of rom-coms and you've sort of bought into a lot of the romantic tropes, which actually in real life sometimes mean that you end up quite upset and it kind of fuck you over a wee bit compared to how life really works. So I think it's actually one that, while it's still got a nice wee message on it and kind of works out for most of them at the end, it's also, you know, a nice wee bit of reality.
And what I got from it was the first hour and a half, fingers in my ears, la 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 la, and then at the end I end up with Justin Long. That's what I got from it. Is that accurate? Is that going to happen?
That's the one unrealistic bit of the movie.
Jennings was on board with it the whole time, and then when he gets with her, he's like, fuck this, turn it off.
Smashes a mirror.
Fuck off.
So that about covers it, I think, for the rom-coms that we've discussed today, at the very least. I'd like to thank our fantastic guest and good friend, Stephen Buchanan, for joining us.
Thanks.
Steve, would you like to tell our listeners where they can find you online and where they can find our sister podcast? Where can people find you online, mate?
People can find us at What's the Script _ I think that's our Twitter handle, and you can just find us on like all the usual podcast sites. And I am at Stephen Bucomedy for Twitter and Instagram and stuff like that. If you want to check out shit out, if you don't want to look up the podcast, I'll probably post like a link to it on my social media, so you can just follow me there.
You can check out you.
You can check out my other stuff. I've got other things on there, guys. There's something for everyone on there, guys. Don't you worry.
Wee bit of cooking, wee bit of comedy, you know.
I've got it all, Jennings. Cooking, music production, comedy, you name it. Radio 4 things, you know.
Jack of all trades.
Master of zero.
Does Roger Egbert have any Instagram? Does he have an online presence?
He doesn't have his own online presence. Roger Egbert, obviously the people who listen to this podcast won't have a fucking clue who that is, but he's the resident critic of my podcast. I've done his voice a few times throughout this podcast.
He's not by any chance done a review of When Harry Met Sally, is he?
He's not. I could do a horrible one on the spot. No, because it does loads of puns. So I would need to come up with them. It's like, fucking Billy Crystal, more like bloody diamond in the rough, you know, something like that. I don't know, like something shit. That is the best I could come up with there.
That was very good.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for coming in, Roger. I don't know where he came from. He just suddenly...
He just lives in my cupboard. He comes out sometimes and then he runs.
I think his bus.
Aye, he's away in his bus. Yeah, he's
time traveling like Donald
films
Gleeson.
About time.
He's got no idea what it's about.
And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please do remember to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening to this now. And there's also a video version of every episode on YouTube.
And if you'd like to slide into our DMs, you can get us at Debating Dating on Instagram. If you'd like to message us about any topics you want us to do, send us any voice notes, or you can send us an email to debatingdatingpod@gmail.com.
So thanks very much for listening, and I'll speak to you soon.
Bye!
See you later.